my name is Mariana Lopez, and I'm the lead user experience designer at AgilityFeat. And here with me today is also Aaron Syme. He's the co-founder of AgilityFeat and a big fan of real-time applications. I'm going to talk to you about design in the fourth dimension, interaction design for real-time applications, and some of the special considerations that you have to take into account when thinking about a fast-changing environment. The structure of this talk is I'm going to give you some feedback, some design takeaways, talk a little bit about real-time, and then I want everybody here in the room to do an exercise with me, and afterwards we can discuss a little bit what were the challenges and what were your thoughts on real-time. Okay, so what's AgilityFeat? We do design and development in Costa Rica. We started to build real-time web and mobile applications. Most of these design considerations and design challenges have been compiled through building some of these real-time web and mobile applications. And then we do user experience, visual design, and product assessments. These are some of our sample clients. Okay, so basically what is real-time? Real-time allows you to establish a connection with a third party who will let you send data and information without having the user refresh their page by pushing information. So that makes information readily available. That also lets you send a lot more data. Here in this example is an application that we built, which is called Sensei, where there was a moderator moderating a retrospective and attendees casting votes and suggesting actions about what has happened during the sprint work. And so what we had was the attendees and the moderator would establish a connection, and the moderator would slide users through the screen and would give commands, and the users would be able to interact with each of the screens, and all of these happened in real time. So people were sending data both ways, and somebody else was controlling the flow of the application for them. So there were some important considerations that we had to take into account, such as showing you that somebody was transitioning through the interface, and also how votes were coming in and how people were sending observations and data. And a more elaborate example is a real-time communication example using WebRTC. So this is a conferencing app that we built. And what they do is you establish a connection through a third party, but then the connection is peer-to-peer. And you have a video channel, an audio channel, and a data channel. And you can start sending information between peers, and you can use web-based camera. So for example, here in this example, we're having a call between two people using their browsers. So real-time is now available for browsers, and it allows you to send data, commands, messages, pictures, information in real time. And this has really opened the scope of what you can do with applications and the type of information that you can send and how you can interact with it. So some examples of real-time applications are, of course, conferencing applications, but then you could think about customer service, allowing people to give better feedback on where you are at the page, what you need to do next, what are the next steps to follow, using it for insurance claims, for online education, for healthcare and wellness applications, and of course as many as you can think of. The key thing to think about here is that you now have a lot more data that is coming in quickly and that is fast changing in the environment, and you want to be able to give the user the most amount of data that they can take into account, and also give it to them structured so that you can have a way to interact with the real world in real time. Some other things to consider. Real time is more than just video, so you could have multiplayer gaming, peer-to-peer data exchanges. I've seen coding applications that can happen in real time, and we've now started to work with video and audio manipulation in real time, so creating songs with your peers through the browser is the kind of innovation that you can think about when you're thinking about real time. So what are some of the design challenges when you come into thinking about real time? And most of these are design challenges that you have even when you're not designing real-time applications and you're designing a little bit more static applications, but they get heightened by the amount of information and the fast changes that are going to be in the screen. So first of all, WebRTC and RTC is very cool. There's a lot that you can innovate and you can do, but don't let the technology become more important than the experience. It's always about the users, always think in a user-centered approach, and always think, is this going to enhance the experience or is this going to make it worse? So for example, in one of the applications that we were building, we built this really cool clock that was synced across everybody's devices, and what we found out was that people spent more time looking at the clock than on actually performing the activity. So we had to rethink and take it out and do a little bit different, because here real time was impeding the experience, not enhancing it. The second thing that you have to think about is feedback is always important. You have to think that feedback is now not only for user actions, it's also about actions that are coming in to the system. So you have to give them feedback about what other devices that are connected to your system are doing, what other servers, what other users, and you have to do something to let people know what's happening in the system and why it's changing even though they didn't do any actions. So for example, in this example, we built this web conferencing app, and at the beginning we didn't give feedback that the other person was having trouble connecting, and it was hard. There's WebRTC is still a brand new technology, and so it was hard to communicate that, and users were feeling left out. So something to keep in mind is that feedback is really important. The third thing that you need to think about is information hierarchy, selecting when and how to show information. So screens, when real data is coming in and it's coming in quickly, you have to think about how you're going to show it, and if you're going to allow the user to select if they want to see it, or if you're going to bombard them with the information. And this is important. For example, Twitter lets you know that there's new updates that came in, but it doesn't automatically scroll your screen because you would lose what you're reading. So this is something that you have to think about, is when are you going to show the information to the user, and how are you going to do that? Remember that movement on the screen really draws the attention of the user, so even if you have things moving at the bottom of your right-hand screen, it's going to distract the user from the relevant information that is at the center or at the top of the page. You also need to think about when there's tracking, on where there's monitoring, which is what happens, and we've had an application. There's outliers, and there's data that is different from what is the rest of the group, and sometimes real-time data can make the screen jump and can make everything very hectic, and that could distract your users from having a good experience and from actually being able to read the data. So you have to do a pre-select, you have to model the data, you have to structure it before you actually show it to the user. So real-time doesn't mean throwing everything out there that you can. It means structure, organize, and even more, give users the information that they're looking for. The fourth consideration is a little bit related to the information hierarchy, is handling changes in a fast-changing environment. So when you're talking about real-time data, items can disappear. How do you handle that with users when they're working with the screen? How do you make them interact with it? How do you let people know what happened since they last saw the screen? What happens if you're working on something and a new item comes into the same thing that you're working on? There has to be some decisions that are important about how the screen changes and when it changes. And And I don't know the answers to all of these questions. It of course depends on the context and the activity that you're building for. So I just want to give you the notion that you have to think about this, especially when you're dealing with mobile design, where the screen is limited and there's a lot that you have to change, and you have to give them enough feedback about what they're doing, what has happened, and what is going to happen. And then the last consideration that is very important is when you're designing for real-time, try to identify important micro-interactions, small interactions that will really enhance the experience. So for example, I don't know if any of you have used Google Hangouts. When it first came out, your video would be on in large groups and your microphone would be off. So that was an interesting decision that they made. I saw a lot of my colleagues sitting on their desks, or sometimes maybe in their pajamas, talking, and you would see their lips moving, and they wouldn't realize that the mic was off but the video was on. So that was interesting. So you have to think about all the little things that make it work, and you have to think that this data is going out into the world in real time, and people are consuming it, and the lapse of time that you have to correct and to make things better is a lot less. So you have to give your users all the power and all the feedback that they need to make the right decisions in a shorter amount of time. And the last consideration is graceful degradation or progressive enhancement. But you have to think about that real time depends on strong connections, how to make the experience better if you have those resources available, but also how to support if you can't. So the next part is the design exercise. What I've done is I've created 3 personas. The first one is a monitoring application for an insurance claim, and what we want to do is make sure that people don't miss important items on the screen. The second one is an education application, and what she's working on is having their students collaborate, and what we want to do is making sure that lists aren't deorganized when new stuff comes in. And the last application is a baby monitor, and we have an overprotective parent who is worried that their connection is coming in and out and doesn't know if it's really working on or not. So these are our design challenges, and I really love to see what you guys come up with.
What happens when connectivity is bad? How do you communicate and fix the connectivity versus something going all wrong? Is it checking?
Okay, so... Yeah. Ready? Which ones of you have designs that I can steal back? This team, can you tell me what you did to solve your problem?
A couple design tweaks we chose were to give some kind of color indication so that he could quickly see, using green, yellow, red to see how things are going, and a refresh rate letting him know that the connection was still working. A little more clarification, I think, on what OK meant. It was a little vague, and so maybe a tip off to the right of that. Clarification on room temperature, it just said temperature, room temperature versus like baby temperature.
That's great. So good things that they thought about was the refresh. They're all great ideas, by the way. The refresh is great. It lets people know that it's still working. The text message going outside of the modal, thinking how to push information instead of having the person consume it is also a great idea. And easier visualizations, color also helps a lot. Did the team that have the baby monitor, do they have something else?
Yeah, a little bit.
The difference is we also incorporated a call mom feature
that when the screen turned red, that it would just kind of pop up and you could just completely like hit that and it would call mom.
In terms of the information hierarchy, at last update in the top right corner, and then just making sure that you're always connected in the bottom left.
Thanks. Do we have one of the education examples? Could you guys talk to us a little bit about?
The idea is to have maybe like a third of your screen represent the class layout, so the seating chart for all the kids, and then there would be a counter in the top right corner for displaying the number of questions that have been submitted. The color could be yellow if they're currently typing something, green if they've submitted a comment. You could play with that. But the counter, it would allow the teacher to see how many questions have been submitted, but then also as those questions are submitted, they're going into the other 2/3 of the screen, into basically just like the student's photo with the question, and then you could have a little move icon. You could basically, once you click on it or hover over it, you'd be able to move it and rearrange the order.
And it's great that you kept with the teaching scenario and you really thought about the persona and how to represent the students and make sure that that their feedback doesn't get lost. So that's awesome. The other education example, do you guys want to add something?
Sure. We were thinking about a few different ways for the students to classify their ideas before they came in, so they could tag them or something they would flow into different categories. The new ones are highlighted somehow.
That's great. An important thing that you mentioned is separating it out into phases. So the idea that it can happen in real time doesn't necessarily mean it should happen in real time. So it's great that you thought of the space for giving people the option to interact and showing questions, and then the second phase is where you can categorize them. So it doesn't have to happen at the same time. That's something that you can enforce and that can make the experience better. And let's just have, we're running out of time, but one of the monitoring applications.
Okay, so our gentleman, John, he is trying to become a manager and just really trying to track his own performance at the insurance company. And so one of the ideas was taking the tickets of estimate or by estimate and actually just plotting it based on how much it's costing the company and what the time frame's been. And so that way he'd be able to identify high cost tickets, and then he could start showing his the management team how long it's taking him to complete a estimate, as well as the problem. One of his big problems is when he walks away from the computer and he comes back, he doesn't know what's changed, and so we were just trying to make the last refresh more prominent, as well as give him some kind of notification so you could see which one's changed, as well as be able to visually see like, oh, 2 or 3 of them changed, and he could quickly see what ones those were.
That's great. Here, the most important thing is having the software make some of the decisions for the user. So figuring out which ones are the important ones based on the information that you had, and better visual representations, definitely. I think we're almost out of time. I just wanted to thank everybody for coming here today. A few suggestions. There's the real-time weekly newsletter that we send out weekly, and the book that we're working on for building real-time web apps. So, thanks.